Some of you might be familiar with the Micro Chapbook RPG. These are ultra simple rules for solo role playing, and I did do a video using this system a bit, although the video that I did was quite different than a straightforward playing of the game, and it gets its name from the fact that you can make these little chapbooks and play essentially dungeon crawls with different themes with just the chapbook if you want. I will put a link to the video that I did on it up here. I may do another video that's more straightforward on the system, but there are quite a few out there. What we're looking at here, though, is the Micro Chapbook RPG card game. And I'm going to walk you through what all of this is and give you a demo of, I'm in the middle of playing a game right now, and give you an example of a couple of turns, and then come back and discuss what this card game is and whether or not it can be integrated into the materials for the physical books, what it offers, etc. This is a dungeon crawl, and it's a little hard to discern what might be going on here. Off to the side here, you can see the map that I am drawing. This represents this little broken axe is where my party is right now. We've just pulled in. We are in this dark stairwell, and you can see the layout here. I'm drawn here, and we are encountering a devil imp, and we'll see how combat works along the way. I am playing 4 characters, 1, 2, 3, you can barely see, and 4. These are pre-generated characters that come with the card deck. There are 120 cards in the card deck, and not all of them are playable cards because they come with a whole bunch of tracking cards that I found a little confusing and am not using, which is what all of these dice lying around are representing my various character stats. The D20 is the willpower stat, and the D100 is the health stat. Health doesn't go up that high, but I wanted to just differentiate it because in case things got messed up, I would know more or less what's what. But when you have a lot of dice lying around, there's always that danger, like this looks like it's fallen off its card. In any case, the game follows the general principles of the booklets and books that you can play. In this case, what you do is you have these decks of cards. You have door cards, room cards, monster cards, and item cards. And you begin by pulling up a door card, and it will tell you something. In this case, it was a dark stairwell. And you begin by pulling in a door card, and I'm not representing a door card here right now. I guess I put it away, but you pull a door card in and it says something like it's locked or trapped or nothing. Move through that door to get to whatever room it is. This is an example of the room card. The room card will have an indication of what the room is and whether or not it has an impact on play. So in this case, in the dark stairwell, it is more difficult to do a melee attack. Now, I always wonder about this card because it seems that it would also be harder to do a ranged attack in a dark stairwell, but the impact here of a +1 is only for melee attack. And the way this game works is you need to roll at or under a stat. So if you are getting a plus to any die roll that you do, and it's a D6 based system, that's making it harder. So in this case, what this means is that if you are rolling melee, say you roll a 2, and your strength stat, which is the melee one, is 2 or 3, you would succeed. But in this case, if you rolled a 2 and your strength stat was 2 and you added 1 to your melee because it's in the dark, you would actually fail that attack. The attack modifier comes into play when you are encountering a monster, and I will show you how combat works. You have the capacity to level up. So for example, if we look at this Dwarven Ranger here, she has leveled up her charisma to 2 because you can spend 10 gold along the way to level up, and my gold amount is represented here. Right now they have 21 gold. I've decided that the gold that they get is just collective. I don't apportion it out, which is not exactly what the rules say, but that makes sense to me. You begin with 5 gold each, and you can purchase items at the outset to help you, and you can see the cost of the items down here. So for example, at the outset of the game, you're instructed to separate out from the stack of item cards anything that costs 5 or less, and then you can do a survey and decide what you want to purchase. It is strongly recommended that everybody get at least one weapon at the outset. This represents a number of rooms into the game, as you can see, and it's kind of off screen here, the rest of my mapping, but we're a number of rooms in, so we had the opportunity to spend some gold. We encountered a room that had some items, and we were able, for example, to get the ranger here a nice ranged weapon that does 2d6 damage, but we had to spend 12 gold to do it. I will say that I am modifying the rules a little bit in that I'm allowing my characters at the end of when a room is cleared of monsters, I'm allowing them to search the room. If it's a corridor, they search at disadvantage, meaning they're rolling 2d6 and taking the higher value, and I'm using the dexterity stat to determine success or failure on that. If it's a room, they can just do a straight dexterity search to see if they can find an item. And then if they do find any items, I'm rolling a 1d3 to see how many items they find. And then I am pulling in that number of item cards and allowing purchases along the way. If you don't do it that way, you are only going to be finding items when you encounter a particular room that, for example, early on I encountered a shop and it had items in it. But I think thematically, I like the concept of the character searching for more items along the way. And also, I am not playing where I'm using all the monsters and all the rooms in the stack to get through the dungeon. I decided to just use half the rooms and half the monsters, partially because of the length of the game, and part of the reason I made this modification was because I decided not to. The game rules would have you use all the rooms that, I think there's 30 rooms that come in the deck. I'm only using 15, and again, all the monsters that come in the deck, I'm only using 15 cards for that. The game just felt too long to me, and there's a boss monster at the end of the game, and there are 4 boss monsters to choose from. You pick one randomly and put it into your stack. Depending on how many characters you are playing with, you can play this game using anywhere between 1 and 4 characters. You encounter the boss monster at a different spot in the end of the dungeon. So with 1 character, in theory, you could encounter it a lot sooner, but when you have 4 characters, you're encountering it at the end. The reason I chose 4 characters is because in this game, and I talked about this no doubt in the other video, when you play with 1 character, the die rolling is rather unforgiving in that you're starting out with such low stats, and in some cases, as you can see here, the bard has this dexterity of 1. To do anything with a dexterity of 1, for example, you have to roll a 1. Or if you have a dexterity of 2, you must roll a 1 or 2 to be successful. So when you have just 1 character, there's just a ton of failure, a ton of things you can't do that become rather frustrating. You can see in the card here in the upper right, there is a stat. This is charisma in a star. She's got dexterity in a star. There is strength in a star here, and you can't see off to the side. The wizard has willpower off to the star. The star means you roll that stat with advantage, meaning you roll 2d6 and then you take the better value. So in the case of having a party of 4, I have all 4 stats, at least 1 opportunity to roll that with advantage and to roll with 2d6s, which just gives obviously a better opportunity for success and overall becomes less frustrating, I think, as you play through, especially before you start to level up. All right, let's take a look at what happens with combat. This is our Devil Imp, and it's got a health of 5. It does 2 types of damage, as do all monsters in this game. The first is what's called willpower damage. When combat begins, as we'll see, every character is doing what's called a bravery check. What this means is essentially a charisma check, and if you pass the charisma check, you're going to regain 1 willpower, and willpower is down here. If you fail it, you will take the willpower damage of the monster. In this case, it's 1d3 damage. If you run out of willpower, that's one of the ways that you can slowly fail in this game. If you run out of willpower, you're not dead, but then you have to start to add +1 to all your rolls. And as we can see, these numbers are very precious here. So that is a big detriment. Your health is a different value. That's here. And if your health goes to 0, you die. The damage that's done here, this H damage, that's the health damage. And that damage is done during combat if you fail rolls. So there's 2 different types of damage, and all combat does begin with this bravery check, which is rolling against charisma. And as I mentioned, every one of my characters is proficient in one thing. My character that's proficient in charisma, of course, is the bard. So when I do this roll for her, she'll be rolling 2d6s. Everybody else will just roll one of their d6s, and they need to succeed at their own stat, to roll at or below their own stat. When I'm playing the game, the reason I have the colored dice is that I do all the rolls simultaneously to speed things up. But in this case, we'll take a look here and we'll see what we do. So we rolled a 2 and a 6, and for the bard, her charisma value, can we see it here, is 3. So she is successful in that. So she's going to regain a willpower here, and she'll go from 12 to 13, which is her maximum there. Next up is going to be the elven fighter, but she's not proficient. So she's only going to be rolling the 1d6, and her charisma value is only 2. So we'll see she gets a 4. That's a failure. So she's going down to 1 willpower. That's pretty bad. I didn't actually realize she was that low. There was an item to restore willpower. I don't have it anymore. I think I consumed it. So that's something that I need to continue to look at to try to fix if we encounter that item. Our wizard here is also not proficient, so we give a roll there. He rolled a 2. That's great because his charisma is a 2. So he's going to go back up to 11 willpower. And then finally, we have our Dwarven Ranger here. Her charisma, she's leveled that up, so it is now 2, but she's not proficient in it. And oh, nice. So she's good, and she rolls a 13. Now, she's at her maximum. I think she can go above that, so we're going to put her up to 14. So that was the first round of combat the first round of combat, essentially. The first thing you do in combat is the bravery check. Next up, beginning with the party leader, and in this case, the party leader is our elf here. I just have this to indicate that it moves around as you go. She's the party leader right now. Beginning with the party leader, if you have a ranged weapon, you can do a ranged attack. The stat for ranged is dexterity. So her dexterity here is a 2, but she's not proficient in it, but she has this ranged weapon, this throwing star, which could do 1d2 damage at the outset. So we will just give a roll here and see if she can make that. She did not, so she tossed the throwing star, but it was a miss. And the main dexterity character we have here, and the only other one with a ranged weapon right now, is our Dwarven Ranger. Now, as mentioned earlier, she picked up this iron longbow, which could potentially just completely take out the imp with its 5 health if she succeeds. So because she's proficient, she gets to roll 2d6, and we give this a roll. And indeed, a 1 is always a success no matter what. We see that she succeeded. So she can now roll for damage. Her 2d6 can potentially do a lot of damage. So let's get some damage dice and roll that up and see. We did do 8 damage. So actually, she was able pretty quickly to just take out this devil imp with her iron longbow before we had any other issues with it. Now, had that not happened, we would move into the next round of combat, which is the melee combat. And in melee combat, everybody needs to make a roll there. Strength is the stat. If you are successful, you can, and you have a weapon, you can do your weapon damage, like with this dagger here. If you don't have a melee weapon, you still have to do that roll. If you're successful, it means you just avoid the damage. And if you fail, again, you take this health damage. And that is how the combat goes back and forth until you eliminate the monster. You can attempt to flee from combat, and that's a dexterity roll, but a majority of your characters in your party have to succeed that roll in order to flee combat, and you still take some damage on the way out. Now, per the game rules, I would just be, after I got rid of the devil imp, I would just be rolling to see how much gold it had, and I will do that. So we'll see how much gold we had. We picked up 5 gold. When you have 4 characters, you get to roll 2d6 for gold. So I'm going to move my 21 gold up to a 26 gold. Per the regular rules, that's all that would happen. But as mentioned, the way that I'm playing, I am going to allow for a check in this hallway to see if there are any items. But because it is not a room, it's a hallway, it's a check at disadvantage. So the chances are pretty unlikely that we're going to find anything, because we roll 2d6 for every character, and we take the higher value. So we have to get pretty lucky to see whether we find anything, but I'm going to do that, and we'll see if we find anything and give that a look. So we roll all these dice, and we have to take the higher value, but we did roll a 1. That's an automatic success. So we actually did, with our elven fighter here, succeed in looking around. This represents the party looking around and seeing she's going to find 1d3 items. So we'll see she found 1 item. So we will go to the item stack. I've moved it off camera here, and okay, that's the first item card. And what did she find? She found a silver axe. It's a melee weapon. It does 1d6 damage, and it costs 6 gold. Now, we can afford it. The question is, do we want it? And I need to look and see what is so we have our main strength character is her. She has a better thing right now. She can carry, per the rules, she could carry 2 weapons. I don't want to get rid of her ranged weapon, even though she doesn't have advantage in throwing it, because I like the concept of having one. I could give this to the bard to upgrade from the silver dagger that does 1 damage, or certainly this silver sword that does 1d6 damage. Maybe I'll do that. It's worth spending the 6 gold. The other thing is, as mentioned, you can spend 10 gold to upgrade any stat, and I probably should consider doing that too. But I think in this case I am going to take this silver axe and upgrade her with that. So I'll substitute that out. You can only carry, there is a limitation on what you can carry, and now is a good time to show you that in the rules. So this is from the rules, and you can see that this is the limitation of, you can carry up to 4 items, 2 weapons or shields, a helmet, and an armor, and that's it. I will say, I bought these from the Game Crafter. I'll put the link down below. If you buy this, as I did, be sure to buy also the version that includes the PDF, because the rules only come as a PDF. You have to print the rules out separately, or just have them separately. They don't come, if you just buy the cards, you will not get the rules. So I will choose to upgrade and spend my money there, and then the procedure, we go back to the party leader shift. So our wizard is going to become the party leader for the next turn, and we go through the sequence of play here. We draw a door, we draw a room, we draw a monster, we do the treasure roll, and this is a reminder of the combat steps. And that's really the game. It's like rinse and repeat after that. So I'm going to come back now and give you my thoughts overall on this card version of the micro RPG. There's a lot to like about this game, and we're looking here sort of at the mess of the end of this dungeon that I played, where my dwarven ranger took out the executioner at the end with her iron longbow, and that was a thrilling conclusion to the dungeon. On the plus side, the simplicity of the system allows you to manage 4 characters without a ton of overhead. You get into a rhythm in terms of doing the rolls and remembering who has advantage for what particular stat. And as mentioned, when you play a party of 4, each character is going to have advantage in one of the basic stats. And that balances out the game a bit from the problems that I had when I played the book version of the game, where you're playing just a single character, and it became imbalanced because, in essence, if you have to do, for example, anything with dexterity to start out, you're failing unless you roll a 1, and ditto strength, you're failing unless you roll a 2. So there's kind of a lot of failure, and it's not so much the failure per se, it's just being at the mercy of a die roll to that extent that you can't mitigate the roll in any way, that I find to be, it just gets boring after a while. But here, with the 4 characters, you at least have an opportunity to feel like you could succeed. The decision-making space of the game is relatively limited. It is a game where when you find items, you may have a decision to make about what to purchase, like a consumable that's going to help you right away, or something that will help you down the road, or an item that can only go to the wizard, for example, as opposed to something that can help out a different character. There's also the choice to be made about spending your gold to get items or saving it to level up. And leveling up costs, as mentioned, 10 gold per stat that you're going to change. So there is that. That is a decision-making space. I will say that there aren't enough upgrade cards. If you're playing 4 characters, I don't think there are enough upgrade cards in the game to level everybody up at, with different stats. So that's something that didn't come up in my game here because I chose to buy items, but that's something just to be aware of. And yet in the game, when you buy it, as I mentioned earlier, in the stack, there's a lot of tracking cards there's a lot of cards that are used to make trackers that I think in the end I did not use. So that's just, again, choices that were made about what cards to produce or not. I think the concept of taking this system, which is as a chapbook system and designed to be so fast and easy to just have one character going through a little thematic dungeon. So this is a skeleton cavern. I have others like these that are thematic to different holidays, like a Halloween one or whatever. It's a great concept, but the idea that maybe playing one of the books using 4 characters, where each character has some other benefit that is complementing the other character, I think that might flesh it out a bit more, at least as far as I'm concerned. I did, as you can see, I bought a bunch of books in the system because I just like the idea of the system and the simplicity of it, but it is a fine line between simplicity and, boredom or repetitiveness. I think in this game, I played an abbreviated version of a dungeon. I didn't use all the dungeon cards as is recommended, and it did even then feel slightly long to get to the boss, because after a while it does, the combat and just the game mechanics, because of their simplicity, feel a bit repetitive. So I think for me to recommend it, I would say that, at least from my perspective, a little modification needs to happen. As I said, my house rule was that they could search for items in each room, and that at least allowed the possibility to bring in and strengthen the characters sooner, so that by the time they got to encounter a boss with like 25 health, it happened at the end of, I think it was 15 rooms or something, 10 rooms as opposed to 30 rooms. They were still strong enough to do that. And that did shorten the game. As I said, it was this. So again, look, this is the boss that we took out with the 25 health. That it did shorten the game, although the game still felt like it definitely could have been slightly shorter. But I would recommend figuring out a way to ratchet up the strength of your characters earlier on so that you could effectively play a game with shorter dungeon. Now, that said, there isn't a way built in to strengthen the monsters. So unless you build that in too, you could find yourself just crushing the monsters. However, there are some in here that are pretty strong. So, and there's no direction as to that. So you could find yourself in the first room, pulling in a room where two monsters show up and they both have 10 health, and you've just started out. Or you could find yourself in a room where there's one monster and it only has 1 health. And there isn't, that's just kind of the luck of the draw in terms of how you shuffle your cards and whatever. So you could probably spend a little more time searching through and figuring out how to make the monsters grow in ferocity as you progress through the dungeon. I didn't do that. I just kind of kept it as random as it was. And when I first set up to play my first exploration into it, just to sort of see how the mechanics work, that's what I described earlier is just what happened. I drew a room, I don't know if there's more than one, but I drew one of the rooms where 2 monsters show up, and both monsters that showed up were super strong and just impossible. And it just, my party just wiped out initially, and I had to start all over. So that could happen. So there's a look inside Micro Chapbook RPG, the card game, and I hope you enjoyed a view into the game.